Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Business Matters Podcast, coming to you from the Wind Technology Studio. And, of course, we want to shout out a huge thank you to our media sponsor, Royal Credit Union. Today, I've got two special guests that are joining us in October throughout the United States. October is kind of referred to as Manufacturing Month to highlight and talk about what does manufacturing mean to our community, our communities across the state, specifically here in Wisconsin. Very strong background to it. And so we wanted to bring in our guest today to talk about how manufacturing has changed and altered Eau Claire since Uniroyal closed 31 years ago now, and how manufacturing itself has changed over the last several decades from a dark, dangerous, dirty industry to really a high-tech, clean, high-paying jobs that I think a lot of people are not aware of, and that it's still a strong industry really to go into. So my guests here today are Luke Hanson. Luke is with the Eau Claire Economic Development Corporation. You know, those acronyms, I'm sure I missed one in there someplace. One of these days, we're all going to have short names, just really tiny ones. And Aaron White with the City of Eau Claire, and your new title is?
The Community Development Director.
And multiple others after that, I think.
Multiple others after that.
I think that's part of, in our roles in life, we have hats that have about 5 or 6 different points to them. So why don't you give the folks both a little bit of background on yourselves and your time here in Eau Claire, and then we'll kind of take it from there. So, Luke, you got tenure on them, I think, around both of us, if I remember right. So
I do. I've been in the community for a long time. I've been with the EDC since 2012, so I've been working on just over 11 years, coming up on 12. So it's been a good run.
Good.
What we do and primarily focus on is business recruitment and retention at the EDC. So we have our businesses that are currently in our community, and a lot of that is manufacturing focused, but what we do is keep our local businesses happy and try to keep them here. So if they are successful and are growing, we want them to grow here. We don't want them to leave. And if we have somebody that is in some struggles, we want to keep them secure and keep those jobs focused here locally. And then our other big one is business recruitment and bringing in those new businesses and those bright, shiny objects into the community. So that is the fun part about our job, is going out and having the community tell us what they want to see here, and going out and trying to go fishing for whales is fun.
Facebook is always telling you what it is they want.
I know. Everybody wants Trader Joe's. I know.
If it's all so easy, right? I mean, just snap your fingers and go for it. So, Aaron.
So I've been in Eau Claire. It'll be 5 years this December. I've been in the economic development realm for going on 20 years, previously in Kansas. Background in operations as well, with years in Cargill. So kind of a diverse background for the position. I've been in the Community Development Director position, which oversees economic development, planning, inspections, and housing divisions for the city. I've been in that role since this summer. On the economic development side, we do a lot of what Luke does, focus strictly within the city boundaries. So we work closely with the EDC on projects within the city. We also work on projects that relate to like housing developments and things like that. Our division also has the city has a revolving loan program that one of the folks in the economic development division manages. So we have a pool of funds that we use to help small business startups, new businesses, or small businesses looking to grow. So we have programs to help with that. We have a facade loan program that can help spruce up the exterior of a building anywhere in the city of Eau Claire. So we do a lot with small businesses on those end of things. And then again, just same type of things, working with businesses, looking to see how we can remove barriers for their success, their growth in here, and also doing the business recruitment. So it's really important for the city. Growth, net new construction is how the city can increase its revenue stream from a property tax side. So new development is a very important piece of being able to properly fund city operations.
And we're number one in the state right now.
And we are number one in the state right now. Absolutely.
So how do you balance? So a couple of things here for you guys to maybe talk about. First of all, a lot of what you guys do is done in secrecy for a lot of reasons. I mean, I know a lot of people complain about that, but a lot of what you're always doing until we bring the shovels out and stand in front of a camera, you can't necessarily talk about. But so talk a little bit about that, but also with how do you balance the growth with, as a community, we want certain assets to maintain it. Where does that balance come in? How do you view that coming from your position to bringing businesses in, but are we creating a balance at the same time?
So that is very well thought out for a lot of both of our organizations. We really have to work together, because if we're going to be bringing in and trying to recruit a company that's bringing in 1,000 or 1,300 jobs, we don't have the workforce for that.
Right.
We're going to steal from every family member that we know for that project to happen. So it's something that we typically won't go after or recruit towards. So it is a very strategic process on what we're looking at and trying to recruit into the area. But also when it comes to when a new project comes in, do we have the housing for it? And that's where the city and Aaron come into play is what are we doing with our current housing study? Are we going to be able to train these new individuals into these new roles, which is a big part of the workforce challenges that they're having. So it's not just throwing towels at the wall and hoping something sticks, but
Sure.
it's really pretty well thought out in how we're trying to attract these companies.
Okay.
No, absolutely. A lot of what I do is look at clusters. We know what industries are here. We look for companies that are potentially complementary. A company that comes in that's going to be able to use one of our existing manufacturers as a supplier, or a company that comes in and can provide a raw product or a finished product to one of our existing manufacturers that then adds it to their product line and moves it out as a further refined or finished component. So trying to complement where we can. And as Luke said, definitely looking at appropriate scale and scope of projects that aren't going to rob every other employer
Right.
and drive them to another community just so we can have this one shiny new project here. So it's a definite balancing act. As Luke said, looking at housing availability, looking at the wages those companies that are coming in are paying. Are they going to pay competitively to make the cost of living work for this area, which fortunately for us, we are much lower than the big metro areas,
Correct.
which is why we do see a lot of interest in outside businesses
Yeah.
looking at communities of this size. There's lower costs versus working in a Milwaukee or operating in Chicago or the Twin Cities type of thing. But a lot of things go into it, and as Luke said, we have some of the best kept secrets in the community because we know some of these projects a year before they're announced, and I'm sitting under 3 NDAs right now, so we can't talk
I want
about
you
a lot
both
of
to touch on that a little bit because, again, have been now 30-some plus years in the chamber. I get this, but I don't think people understand how long you work on a project. Again, to the point of before we put the shovel in the ground. And again, so many people I've watched, again, social media is great about this. Bring us Trader Joe's, do this. They just think you snap your fingers and they happen. But talk a little bit about that process you both watch and see to get us to the groundbreaking.
Right, and so when you're looking at the entire scope of economic development, it takes a long time. So some of the projects that we've worked on has been in constant communication under non-disclosure agreements for the past, say the longest one that I've been a part of is 7 years, is before this project actually took place. So we've been working with a company for 7 years, and then the community finally knows about it, after year 7. When they actually break ground and are starting to coming into the community. So right now it's I'm with Aaron. I've got about 3 NDAs out there for different projects that we're working on, and we can't share. But
explain to folks what NDA is, what it means.
An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement that basically provides the company some protection on if this gets out into the community or out into the media. Really, it can hinder the project. So we have companies that have very well focused on, they have their current employees and they don't want their current employees to know that they potentially might be moving or coming to
Sure.
a new location and they may not have a job. So that's a concern. Other concern is politics. When it gets into the media, there's things that can happen. We all know this one firsthand, and an NDA is basically protection to hopefully keep this under wraps until it's actually public information. So while we're working with the attorneys, while we're trying to get the land to be site ready and developed, we're we just want to make sure everybody's comfortable
Sure.
before we have
Okay.
to go out.
The confidentiality piece is a lot more important than I think a lot of folks would realize. Any company that's coming and looking at a community, their competitors are watching what they do. They're looking at the same markets oftentimes, so they may suddenly try and come into a market faster if it's slipped out of business or a particular project is looking at a community. If it's an expansion, that doesn't always come out with the notice, and suddenly somebody may think that, they're leaving our town and going to this town, so suddenly all their customers stop coming to them in their original location, when it's not the case.
Right.
But it can hurt their business when it slips out in a way that's not controlled by the company. So the confidentiality of that type is very important. Slips can also hurt communities. One of the communities I worked with in Kansas, community a little smaller than Eau Claire, two prime examples of why confidentiality is important. One project was slipped that Home Depot was looking at a location in there. Lowe's immediately stepped in and bought a 5-acre site and announced their building, and Home Depot left. So it was a market that probably could have held them both, but a competitor found out their competitor was coming in, they got in there first, and then the other one walked away. The second one, and it's a similar industry, we've been working on a project for a year and a half. New location, the deal was just about done, and a member who should have known better, who was working on the project, actually let some folks in the community know that this big company was coming. It's exciting. It's a great piece of news. He wanted to be able to brag about this is what we're doing. We were at dinner with the real estate VP for this major corporation, and some random person came up to the CEO of the company I was working with that was doing economic development for the city, and said, "Hey, it's great to see you. This must be the guy from X. We're so excited to have you in the community." And this guy's face just went blank. And the rest of that dinner was really quiet. And 3 days later, they killed a $40 million project. Said, "We will never be in your community."
Wow.
It wasn't until he retired, like a year and a half later, and his replacement started reviewing old locations, that we got back on the radar and ended up getting that project. It was delayed by almost 3 years because of that, because somebody said something they shouldn't
Sure.
have, and the company got concerned and they walked. So it can have direct costs. That's 3 years of property tax, and in the case of Kansas, sales tax collections that the city did not get because somebody said something that they shouldn't have to somebody that should not have known about the project at that time. So confidentiality is a big thing.
Well, I always share the story, of course, about Disney and get people to understand. I mean, you look at what Walt did when they moved to Florida. I mean, they worked through 50 different law firms and everything just to keep the price from going through the roof. So again, the reason I wanted to touch on it is I hear from people that they think there's something wrong with that or it's illegal. It's really it's to protect everybody. And again, businesses have to make those decisions, and the longer they can keep competition maybe from knowing or whatever is a good thing. So let's come back a little bit to, again, as we started manufacturing, from both of your viewpoints. How do you view the manufacturing industry? Aaron, you touched a little bit on clusters as you look at future development. How do you both view the manufacturing industry, not just here in Eau Claire, but in the valley itself?
Diversifying is one of the best ways to state it. I think we see a variety of skill sets, a variety of industries here that are not necessarily direct competition to each other. We have metal manufacturing, that type of general manufacturing. We have composites and plastics manufacturing. We have wood product manufacturing, serving different industries. That kind of diversity is important. What you see with Uniroyal closing in the 90s, what happens when you have a single industry driving a whole bunch. When they leave or change something, it's a massive impact to the economy of those communities. You see the same thing in the automotive industry. You see the same thing in the aviation industry, a very specialized single manufacturer that's a monster in the community with thousands of employees. When they shift something or when they close, the ripple effects go a long ways. So having a more diverse manufacturing base, which what we see here is a much healthier economy or a much healthier landscape for manufacturing in a community. It's a big thing.
It is a big thing, and we're seeing a big shift now, as in manufacturers are becoming less reliant on workforce, and they're becoming more heavily invested into automation. and being able to have animatronics and manufacturing processes basically gets hands off, and that's also a good thing for less workman's comp, less people getting their fingers stuck in a piece of machinery, and you've got a piece of equipment that can actually weld or can run the line or it can operate and package and ship and you name it. We have current manufacturers in Eau Claire that a single human hand doesn't touch the product.
Correct.
And as it goes through the entire line from putting the initial raw materials in and having the finished product come out the end and packaged and shipped and put on a truck. It's never touched by a human hand.
But people also need to realize that's happening because we don't have enough workers. We're not replacing jobs in essence. They're doing that because we can't find enough bodies. But we also need to remember it still takes a person to operate the computer to do that whole thing. It's they don't operate themselves yet, thank God.
And it's a whole different skill set and a whole different set of training. And,
and again, that's right, Topio. That's we've come from that dumb and dirty age to it is high tech. You need those computer skills. You need to understand all of these different variances. And you're right. One of the things that I always I don't know what the word I should use, maybe amazed or frustrated at the same time in our communities is most of our manufacturers are hidden. People don't have a clue unless you work there, somebody at these, what we make and what gets shipped out of here. Because that's for most of our manufacturers, their products are not being used in our communities. It's being shipped someplace else. Mm-hmm. And again, you both touched on it, the variety that we have. And Aaron, I've always talked about, I'd rather have, 10 manufacturers with 100 or 200 each than one at 10,000 because, when they leave, I can remember I called a very good friend of mine a long time ago. He was my counterpart down in Janesville. And when the GM plant closed down there, I don't know, must have been maybe 20 years ago now. I said, how you doing? That's just got to be devastating for your community. He says, Dave, I'll tell you what, half my community is cheering they're gone, and the other half is sad. And he said, again, to your point, Aaron, you don't realize how much that big footprint controls everything. And so there's that balance. So I think most people today, they'll understand the diversity is a critical thing for us.
Yeah, as Luke touched on the automation, it's better for the employees. A lot of positions that are getting automated are ones that have high workplace injury rates or long-term breakdowns in the body because it's heavy lifting, it's bending, it's twisting. It's those things that are continuous, repetitive motions that cause repetitive motion industries or injuries. And seeing those shift over to automated positions are healthier for the employees that are there. And those employees that are working in those areas, our employers are really good about upskilling the folks that are on the floor. Yeah. So suddenly they're learning how to operate the robotic stuff that's doing what they used to do. They're getting paid more to do it, and they're overseeing more responsibilities. So it doesn't have the numbers, and economic development and assistance packages from like the state are starting to catch up with the idea that it's not necessarily about the body count, it's about the quality of the job and what skill sets and up training it brings that as a benefit to the employees that are there.
You say it's not necessarily, the job numbers are not the same, but just in the last month, some of my team members and I, we toured 2 local facilities, both significantly large, both going through major refurbishments on behalf of the companies. One, I think 3 of them total a little over $100 million, and the other one somewhere in the 25, 30 million. But yet both CEOs and both presidents of the companies made a statement to me that the reason they're doing it here is, one, because of the workforce. And again, they both kind of apologized. We're sorry, it's only 30 jobs. But then the plant managers quickly looked at me and said, but understand, they're protecting the 600 or the 300 jobs that we have. Those companies are making improvements here because of that workforce. So it may not bring a lot at times, but it protects what we have versus both those other companies we went are shutting other things down and coming here.
Correct. And what you see with that is not just that we have the numbers for workforce here in Eau Claire. I mean, we still are shy in quite a few areas, but it's the gumption of our workforce.
Correct.
We have people that are willing to get up and go to work every day, and you don't see that in other parts of the country.
Yeah, and that was, again, what was interesting. Both of these 2 facilities we toured, both have corporate headquarters, not just outside the state of Wisconsin, but outside of our country. And yet, when I specifically asked, how do you view Eau Claire? Is it just a pin on on a map someplace, and they're like, no, we know this community quite well. We're very pleased with that workforce. As you just said, look, they're showing up, they're going to work. We don't struggle with that, the old Midwest work ethic that is somewhat, I think, coming back in a ways.
It is.
So one of the things that we've talked about in our development meeting over the last 3 to 4 months, again, I think this has a lot to say of what your organizations are doing. We're running out of space in our industrial parks, which is a good thing. But then that has to, where next? Where do we go? So how are you seeing that? I mean, what are those steps that as a community we need to take to, again, where does development go? And unfortunately, we do have areas that people don't want to see anything. But reality is, if we stop growing, we're in trouble. Now, I think you both mentioned, we just hit the highest construction numbers in the state, and we just took over the 7th largest city in the state of Wisconsin. Those are all fabulous things, but growth has to come with planning. So how do where do we go in the industrial park area if we are getting sold out?
So we've had several discussions on it, but we still haven't landed on a particular location on where we would expand our industrial park. If it would be a current expansion of the existing Gateway Industrial Park, which we currently have, and we have a few acres left in there, but we're running out of space really fast. Or if we take that model and we move it to a different location in our community, and what might that location be, and what's the proximity to major corridors for northwest, east and south, and what's going to be beneficial for the manufacturers that we can recruit and build into that location. So,
we address it in a lot of the same ways that the companies themselves that are looking at a community address a site selection process. First off is it proximity to 4-lane highways, easy in and out for semi-traffic, inbound raw product, outbound finished products. Is there access to rail or potential for access to rail? Because that's a market that we have a hard time hitting right now. We don't have any direct rail access sites, so being able to pick one up opens up a new world of potential submissions for projects that are looking for rail service. Where's the utilities? How quickly can they be stretched to make the site shovel ready? Is water and sewer of a sufficient capacity to handle a broad range of types of industries? Is there sufficient power in close proximity to quickly deliver power needs to users, which again in the industry, in the manufacturing world, power users can vary dramatically. Some who are very small and very efficient to some who probably have a substation all of their own because they use so much power. And because of the lead times to do all these utility extensions, we look for places that make this easier and faster process to go. That speeds our ability to put in front of folks to market. We can let companies know that, hey, our sites get you to the market faster, because that's what most of them are looking for, is how quickly can I turn a shovel and be operational on the site if I choose you as a location. So we go through a lot of those same type of decisions and prospects and looking at. From the city standpoint, we also look at what's our overall comprehensive plan. Where do we see growth? Where we have identified growth through the comp plan, through the future land use plan, which those are all things that the city renews and reviews regularly. So we use that as kind of a guiding tool as well.
And all with the focus on the least impact on local residents. We don't want to be bringing heavy truck traffic through a residential area, period. It's just something that we don't want, or nobody in the community wants, and if we do that, we're going to upset a lot of people. So we just have to be very strategic in where it goes.
I think that's an important point, but I would also add that people have to remember too, or maybe understand first, then remember, is the impact manufacturing has on our community. Again, it's, certainly for them, they prefer being, I'll say, in the outskirts, because they're not facing that criticism. But then it also hurts because people don't see it. They don't understand because again, as I mentioned earlier, their products are not necessarily being used here, which means they get shipped out. I always joked at 2:00 in the morning and people don't see it. But, and again, that's the purpose of doing this podcast this month and talking about the criticalness of manufacturing. When you talked earlier and about diversity of the community, it's not just manufacturing, it's do we have retail, do we have all these other sectors, so people understand if one piece leaves, we don't have that devastation, So I hope people take a better. I was always encourage people, and still do with our leadership, our adult leadership program. Take 1 month out of your year and drive a different way to work every day and see what's in our community and understand how critical those jobs are to our industry. And when you look at not just the business being here and the taxes they're paying, but the wages and all of that trickle-down effect is significant in the community. How do you view that? I mean, what would you suggest to people to help understand that?
When we look and do analyze projects, we can actually go back to hard data on that. The RIMS data actually provides multipliers of what happens when you create a primary job, and we can go in and access groups have access to the RIMS data. We can give them a 6-digit NAICS code, which is the code that identifies what a particular industry or business is, and they can tell you what the multiplier effect is for every job hired on that position. Some of the high-paying, very advanced types of manufacturing, for every job created there, it may spin 5 or 6 secondary jobs off, which you said that's supporting the clerk at the coffee shop where those employees are stopping to get coffee every morning on the way to work, the restaurants that they go to, the retailers that they attend. That money trickles through the entire economy and supports a slew of small businesses and local businesses. But it's those folks that are paying better than average wages. They're paying very good wages on the trades, particularly if you're looking at machinists, welders, folks who have very good skill sets.
Yeah.
They're making some great. I mean, there are weld shops here that with overtime guys are making $70,000, $80,000 a year or more in this community right now.
Correct.
With a 9-month welding certificate.
Yeah.
So that money trickles out a long ways into the community, and that's the real value and benefit that you get from a strong manufacturing base is primary employers.
Primary employers, and also a good educational system behind them to support those employers.
Yeah.
I mean, we have wonderful relationships with their UW Eau Claire, and we have wonderful relationships with Chippewa Valley Technical College, and they work with all of our local employers, whether that is commercial or retail or a lot of manufacturing, on what do they need to do to train these new individuals coming into the workforce that are going to be hopefully just implemented into your company and be able to pick it up and go and run with it. And
well, that's a whole podcast in itself that we could be talking about of careers and efforts through CVTC and our K-12. What are some of those careers that kids, youth, young adults could be looking at that, sometimes have a manufacturing willing to pay for those hours to make sure that they get a worker. So
that's exactly it. And when you're looking at just in general, what manufacturing used to be seen as, and it used to be seen as dirty, grimy, dark, and now you come into a manufacturing and you're starting to see a shift, but that younger generation saying, that's pretty cool. You're making something right here in Eau Claire that's going into space, or you're making something that goes into every piece of technology in this world on your cell phones
and
right here in Eau Claire.
I get to do it on the computer and not with my hands. So.
Right.
So as we start to wrap up here a little bit, one of the our final question we always like to ask people is, what is business? How do you view, our podcast is called Business Matters. How do you view business to you in the Eau Claire Chippewa Valley? How does it matter when you look at that? What's the importance of business?
Everything. I mean, it comes down, if you don't have the employers, you don't have the jobs, you're not going to have the population, and you're going to be a dying community. So people are just it's going to fall away. If you have business and industry that are here to support that, it's the foundation. It supports everything. It gives people jobs, gives people a reason to live, gives people an income, provides them a house, and you name it. That's why we are a successful and growing communities, because we have our businesses here supporting this community.
Luke hit it on the head. I mean, in the economic development world, our mantra is if you're not growing as a community, you're dying. It is a rare community that can stay static year after year. Nothing changes, nothing improves, because eventually your younger population says there's no opportunity here to grow, so they leave. You will die as a community if you aren't actively growing as a community. And he hit it on the head. What brings people to this community is the retail opportunities to shop, the restaurants to shop at, the services that are found here that can't be found anywhere else in a very broad swath of western Wisconsin. We are the hub for retail, education, jobs within a broad chunk of Western Wisconsin, and all of that is centered around business, small and large. The large businesses providing the big employers and really good paying jobs, and all those small businesses that provide all the services that folks want to have when you have a good job, a place to shop, a place to hang out, stuff to do. All of that goes all into a community, and it's all centered around business.
And it's, I've always viewed that and tell people I look at that, it's called quality of life, and that's something your organization, Luke, is also now kind of integrating into what you do. Mm-hmm. But it's, I've always told folks I view it from my hotel days as those are the extras. Not everybody's going to use your tennis court, but somebody is, and the bike paths and all the other stuff. So it is that quality of life that, as we grow, we talked earlier, we want to make sure that we grow at a rate and in areas that protect that quality of life and give people what they want. So,
I'd say that today it's not even the extras. The quality of life is probably a bigger driver than it ever has been.
True.
Because in the younger workforce, more than it's ever, and workforce and HR has been very slow to learn this, but younger employers are finding young employees, young workforce are finding a cool place to live and find the job when they get there.
Yes.
So if the quality of life of a community isn't there, the things to do and the things to engage with isn't there, they're just going to pass you by.
Yeah. If they don't have something to do after work, or if they do have the one that is the job or the earner of the home, and their spouse has another opportunity to do something they want to do throughout the day, that is what is a big driver as well.
Very good. Any final announcements from either of you gentlemen or from your organizations you'd like to share?
Definitely just like hit a couple of upcoming events. Part of the Economic Development Division is working as Downtown Eau Claire, Inc. Our next two big events coming up, we will have our Trick or Treat in the downtown. Will be coming up on Halloween. And then our in later this year, as part of the Small Business Saturday or Shop Small Saturday, we will be doing our Wintertime in the City again, which will be pictures with Santa, hot cocoa, hot apple cider. We've been doing that for a number of years, and that's coming up later later in November as well.
Luke?
And upcoming this weekend, we have our Startup 48 weekend, which is basically a all hands on deck for 48 hours. We have young entrepreneurs that are trying to start a business, and they'll come up with an idea on Friday, and by Sunday afternoon, when they make their final pitches, they'll have a successful minimum viable product to launch to market, so which is pretty
Wonderful.
unique. And then hopefully on December 11th is what our plan is to have kind of an economic update for the EDC on our current state of Eau Claire and our Eau Claire economy. So
Wonderful.
And then we're collectively working on a couple of big projects that, again, we can't talk anything about.
Yep. NDAs signed on NDAs. We've got plenty of those.
Just let me know when you can. I'll stand on the building top for you.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Dave.
I like shouting. So, and upcoming for the Chamber, we have, of course, our Economic Outlook Luncheon coming up in November. So registration is open for that, so please come. And we're also, just a heads up on that, we're going to do a second one probably in March because this one here, we have somebody coming from the national level of what's happening. So in March, we want to bring some folks up from the state and maybe the U.S. Chamber to talk more local on the economy and where things are going. So as we wrap up here today, I want to make sure that we thank and recognize our sponsors. Of course, Business Matters Podcast is coming to you from the Wind Technology Studio, and our media sponsor is Royal Credit Union. Could not do this program without those wonderful entities and the support that they give to the Chamber, not just with this podcast, but throughout the year. So thank you both. Gentlemen, I want to thank both of you for coming in today and helping us out. Thanks, folks, and we'll see you down the road, as they say.